For this report, we're digging into a hidden infrastructure crisis. And no, it's not our bridges or roads. It's something much closer to home, hiding in plain sight in just about every town across America. We are talking about cemeteries and the massive unfunded cost of their promise of forever.
You know the idea, right? We all get it. A cemetery is supposed to be permanent, a final resting place, secured by this really solemn promise that it's going to be cared for, well, forever.
But here's the thing. That promise is going bankrupt. The entire financial model that was built to support this sacred vow is crumbling. And it's creating this slow-motion crisis that's about to spill right over the cemetery gates and become everyone's problem.
So, to really get what's happening, we have to go back and look at the promise itself. The whole idea of the modern cemetery that popped up in the 20th century, it wasn't just about creating these beautiful park-like spaces. It came with a whole new financial product designed to pay for them forever.
And that product is called perpetual care. Honestly, you can think of it like an old-school pension plan. The idea was pretty simple. You buy a plot, and a piece of that money goes into a trust fund. That fund gets invested, and the interest it earns is supposed to pay for mowing the grass and general upkeep, forever. The problem? The whole thing was built on economic assumptions from a world that just doesn't exist anymore.
And this right here is the heart of the problem. The math that was supposed to guarantee forever, it just doesn't add up in the 21st century. The model is fundamentally broken.
I mean, just look at the difference. Back in the 1950s, a trust fund could pretty easily pull in 5 or 6% interest. At the same time, the costs for things like labor and fuel were cheap. Today, that world has been completely turned on its head. Interest rates are lucky to hit 2 to 4%, while the cost of just keeping the place looking decent has gone through the roof.
So what does that actually mean in real dollars? Well, that perpetual care payment that was made on a grave decades ago, today it might only generate about $1.50 in income for the whole year. That's it. $1.50 to maintain that space for 365 days.
But if you talk to commercial landscapers, the actual cost for just basic mowing on that very same spot is closer to $4 a year. So right away, you've got this gap that's just impossible to sustain.
It creates what's called a structural deficit. For every single one of those older graves, the cemetery is losing about $2.50 every single year. This forces them into this really dangerous cycle. It's almost like a Ponzi scheme, where they have to keep selling new plots just to pay for the upkeep of the old ones.
Now that subsidy model only works as long as new customers keep walking in the door. And that's the second massive blow to this business model. The main source of income, traditional burials, is basically drying up.
This is what people in the industry call the cremation cliff, and you can see why. The preference for cremation is just skyrocketing. It passed traditional burial back in 2016, and it's on track to hit almost 80% by 2040. This absolutely decimates cemetery revenue, because a cremation niche brings in just a tiny fraction of the money of a full burial plot. It's starving those already struggling trust funds.
So what happens when the math doesn't work and the revenue disappears? You get a collapse. But it doesn't always look like a field of overgrown weeds. A lot of the time, it's something way more subtle, what you might call a maintained ruin.
And here's the fine print, a critical legal distinction that almost nobody knows about. We, the public, we expect perpetual care to cover everything, including the headstone, right? But in most states, the law only says the cemetery has to maintain the grounds. You know, mowing the grass, pruning the trees, fixing the roads. The monument itself, legally, that's the private property and the responsibility of the family.
This actually leads to a really simple way you can check the financial health of a cemetery in your own town. It's called the grass height audit. Go find an older section from the mid-20th century. If you see that the grass is neatly cut, but the headstones themselves are sinking or tilted or falling over, you are looking at a visual sign of financial failure. They have enough money to pay for the mower to go by, but not nearly enough to do the real foundational work. The promise is literally sinking into the ground.
Eventually, this quiet decay leads to outright abandonment. The nonprofit board just dissolves, or the owner vanishes, and the property is just left there in legal limbo. And when that happens, the cost of forever becomes a public problem. It's paid for by you and me, the local taxpayers.
So who cleans up the mess? Well, it's a total patchwork of state and local laws, with absolutely no federal plan. In a place like Ohio, a local township is forced to take over an abandoned cemetery. In Texas, a county can take over, but they rarely do because of the cost. The one consistent theme you see everywhere is that the financial burden almost always gets pushed down to the most local level of government.
Okay, so the model is broken and the bill is coming due. It sounds pretty bleak, I know. But in the face of this crisis, some really incredible and creative solutions are starting to pop up.
The first, and maybe the most radical idea, is to just stop treating cemeteries as warehouses for the dead and start treating them like living assets for the community. The concept is actually really simple. You have to integrate the living to pay for the care of the dead.
And if you think that sounds a little out there, check this out. At the historic Congressional Cemetery in Washington, D.C., they started a membership program for local dog owners called the Canine Corps. That program now generates over $200,000 in revenue every year, which helps pay for preservation. But it's more than just the money. It completely transformed a dead space into this vibrant community hub, literally full of life every single day.
All right, here's another dual-use model that taps into a cemetery's most obvious resource, all that open land. In Belleville, Illinois, the city leased some unused acres at Mount Hope Cemetery for a solar farm. This is such a cool idea. It provides a steady, reliable income stream that directly pays for mowing and upkeep of the graves. They're creating a financial lifeline from an asset that was just sitting there.
And finally, there's the conservation model, which you often see with green burials. This one completely flips the script because it attacks the cost side of the problem. Instead of spending a fortune on maintaining these perfectly manicured lawns, you replace them with self-sustaining native meadows and forests. The long-term cost of upkeep just plummets. It's a powerful way to line up the financial needs of the cemetery with the ecological goal of conserving land. So let's just quickly recap. The old financial model of perpetual care, it's broken. And the cost of that broken promise is landing squarely on the public. The only sustainable way forward means we have to completely redefine what a cemetery is for. And as we've seen, bringing the living back into these spaces might be the only way we can actually afford to care for the dead.
And all of this leaves us with a really big question. It's not just for city councils or state legislators, it's for all of us. As this hidden crisis starts to come to light in our own backyards, we have to ask ourselves, what do we really owe the dead? And who among the living should have to pay the price of forever?